Free unlimited energy is in the air right now. We harvested it from every government building in 1890 until we demolished them and pretended they never existed. And now they're patenting it, calling it breakthrough technology and charging you monthly for it. They're billing you for air and you're paying. How did they pull this off? Start with Chicago, 1860. Travelers wrote about it the way you'd mention interesting local architecture. I witnessed the violation of fundamental physics, but charming local custom. The buildings walk around sometimes. As if gravity were negotiable. As if Newton's laws had a customer service department you could complain to, which, given how often they were ignored in Chicago, apparently had terrible hold times. January 1858. Chicago announces a grade-raising project. The goal: creating adequate drainage gradients for modern sewage systems, preventing cholera outbreaks. Reasonable objective: completely insane execution. They began by lifting a 750-ton, 4-story brick structure 6 feet into the air using jack screws. Manual jack screws. It's like deciding to perform open-heart surgery with a butter knife because technically it's sharp, or launching a rocket using a really enthusiastic slingshot. By 1860, they elevated a 320-foot masonry row on Lake Street, estimated weight 35,000 tons, using 600 men operating 6,000 jack screws. For context, 35,000 tons is roughly the weight of 300 fully loaded Boeing 747s. Except Boeing, 747 have engines. And engineers who went to school, and probably don't have a foreman yelling "heave" in iambic pentameter. Modern structural engineers need laser-guided hydraulic systems and computer modeling to lift a building even a few inches without catastrophic failure. But sure, Victorian manual labor with handheld screws? I'm sure they eyeballed it. Looks level to me, Dave. Close enough for government work? The buildings stayed open. A contemporary traveler, David McCrae. I documented this. Never a day passed during my stay in the city that I did not meet one or more houses shifting their quarters. Right up there with nice weather we're having, and the buildings are ambulatory today. The most disturbing account comes from a guest at the Tremont House Hotel. He checked out and noted that the windows were several feet above his head, whereas before they had been at eye level. Dear diary, lovely breakfast. The building grew 3 feet. Ah, charming city. The front desk probably just shrugged. Did you want the same room tomorrow or one at the original elevation? Either 19th century laborers were secretly time-traveling engineers, or someone's telling us the Victorian equivalent of, my dog ate my homework, then built a suspension bridge, and filed the patent, and won an engineering award. Very talented dog. Sought because the alternative, that these buildings were designed to be adjustable from the beginning, raises a question nobody seems to want to ask. Who designed them that way? Now the official rationale. Chicago needed to raise street grades to create proper drainage. Here's the problem. New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and London all installed modern sewage systems in the exact same era without raising a single building. They dug down, like normal engineers, like people who understand that up is the hard direction. Chicago's solution was to manually jack-screw lift 35,000 tons of masonry while people worked inside. That's either spectacular incompetence or spectacular cover-up. Photographic evidence from cities across multiple continents shows the same pattern. Full-sized doors and windows submerged well below street level, creating basements that were clearly designed as ground floor spaces. These are rooms with 10, 12, and 15-foot ceilings, unless Victorian architects were really optimistic about human evolution. We're 5'6" now, but give us 50 years, we'll be dunking. Go look at photos of basement windows in old European cities right now. Rome, Prague, Edinburgh. See those windows half buried on the sidewalk? Ask yourself, did the architect really design a window for people to look at compacted dirt? Because if I'm designing a window, I'm not optimizing the view of sewage pipes and rat traffic. That's not feng shui. That's psychological warfare. Imagine explaining this to OSHA today. Yeah, we're going to jack up this 27,000-ton unreinforced brick building using Renaissance-era screw technology. But don't worry, accounting will still be on the second floor processing invoices. Health and safety is our top priority. You'd be arrested before you finish the sentence. They'd create a new law just to arrest you twice. So, something buried these cities. The question is, was it natural or was it cleanup? Because if you're hiding evidence of what these buildings actually did, burying them is step 1. Destroying them is step 2. But first, we need to talk about what made these buildings so special. Because all those structures they raised, they all had metal spires. Pull up a photo of any major 19th century government building. Notice anything? The dome, the spire, the obelisk, massive conductive metal structures extending 50, 80, saw 100 feet into the atmosphere. When's the last time you saw the DMV with a lightning rod that looks like it's receiving transmissions from Jupiter? The official explanation: domes distribute structural weight. Spires are religious symbols. Metal components serve as lightning rods. Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod in 1752, a simple grounded metal rod. The IKEA version of electrical safety. Assembly instructions, 1 page. Install time, 15 minutes. SAW doesn't require a PhD in atmospheric physics or a direct line to the Earth's core. These structures had hollow cast-iron columns functioning as concealed downpipes, linking the upper roof area directly into subterranean networks. That's not lightning protection, that's a closed-circuit collection system. Why would you design an elaborate network of hollow columns channeling from the highest points into underground chambers unless you were collecting something? You know, the way your home's lightning rod connects to an elaborate underground laboratory. Standard residential code, right between smoke detector on every floor and secret energy harvesting basement. Here's some basic atmospheric physics that somehow never makes it into architectural history discussions. Earth's atmosphere possesses a vertical potential gradient. In fair weather, electrical potential increases 90 to 150 volts direct current per meter of altitude. See, this has been documented for over 200 years. But somehow it never comes up when discussing why every government building has a massive metal spike on top. Modern ion collector physics demonstrates that sharp, needle-like conductive protrusions readily couple to near-Earth ions, ionizing atmospheric voltage into usable electrical current. Which is why every serious atmospheric energy collector looks like it's trying to stab God. Which is fascinating, because apparently every 19th century architect independently discovered advanced atmospheric physics while designing decorative roof ornaments. It's like stumbling across calculus while arranging furniture. I was just trying to make the foyer look nice and accidentally invented free energy. Whoops, my bad. So, we have 19th century buildings featuring conductive spires constructed from highly conductive materials like copper and brass. Connected via hollow iron columns to subterranean networks. And we're supposed to believe this is all coincidence? Sure. And the pyramids were just really ambitious grain storage. Right? Because when I think decorative, I immediately think highly conductive brass orbs filled with dielectric capacitor materials. You'd find it in any issue of Victorian Better Homes and Gardens, right between the throw pillow tips and the mercury-filled resonance chamber installation guides. Saw it this month. Accent walls and passive atmospheric energy harvesting. 10 tips for optimizing your home's electrical field coupling. The Crystal Palace featured hollow cast-iron columns that doubled as water drainage pipes. Official explanation, efficient rainwater management, which makes sense until you examine the finials. Historical records document glass, brass, copper, and purported red mercury in the ornamental spheres. Exactly what you'd use to maximize electrical charge accumulation. Not unless your aesthetic is functional Tesla coil disguised as architecture. But identical geometric fortifications appearing simultaneously on 5 continents with 17th century sailing ship, communication speeds? That's someone hitting Control-C, Control-V across the entire planet before email existed. Before fax machines. Before carrier pigeons unionized. Enter the star forts. These structures appear identically on every inhabited continent from the 16th to 19th centuries. Sao, Europe obviously, but also Taiwan, Ghana, remote Pacific islands, places that didn't even know the other places existed, but somehow got the exact same memo about fortress geometry, which would be convincing if these structures weren't positioned in locations with zero military strategic value. Islands where the biggest military threat is aggressive seagulls. You know, the way you'd build an elaborate missile defense system in your backyard to protect against your neighbor's cat. Why, the cat looked at me funny. Time to build a Pentagon-grade fortification with overlapping fields of fire. Here's what the official explanation is missing. Star fort footprints exactly match complex cymatic geometries. Cymatics is the study of visible sound vibration patterns, which means these aren't random defensive shapes. They're tuned. They're not forts. They're speakers. Giant, stone, mathematically perfect speakers built into the ground. Military engineers don't independently recreate the geometric pattern that sound waves make at 432 Hz unless that pattern serves a specific non-military function. Unless 18th century military strategists were really into sacred geometry and just forgot to mention it in the war plans. If you want to see more cases where the official story collapses under basic scrutiny, hit subscribe, because this is just the warm-up. We haven't even gotten to the part where they burned all the evidence. A direct quote from modern atmospheric research. Physics-based modeling shows that an electron cloud forms around the ion collector material, and this electron cloud increases conductivity of the air. And the integration of conductive spires, hollow iron grounding columns, and in cymatic-based geometry perfectly mirrors the schematics for an engineered global grid designed to passively harvest the 122 quadrillion watts sustaining Earth's electric field. 122 quadrillion watts. It's free. It's unlimited. And we've been told it doesn't exist. That's free energy, just sitting there, in the air. which every Victorian architect apparently knew how to harvest, but somehow forgot to mention in their memoirs. Oh right, the free unlimited energy grid. Yeah, no, it didn't seem important. Focused more on the decorative molding. What were all those metal spires actually connected to? Architectural surveys have documented extensive subterranean networks beneath these structures, chambers, tunnels, water channels, all connected to the hollow downpipe columns. The official explanation is drainage and foundation support, which makes sense for columns that go down 10 or 15 feet. It makes less sense for networks extending hundreds of feet underground. That's the kind of grounding you need when you're pulling 40,000 volts out of thin air. The question isn't, were these buildings beautiful? The question is, were these buildings functional? Because the architecture screams energy infrastructure, and then suddenly, we stopped building them. More than that, we actively destroyed the ones that existed. But first, the timeline problem. If these buildings were functional energy infrastructure, who built them? The official answer, we did. In the 19th century, super fast, with horses, and vibes, mostly vibes. 1850. The Committee for London's Great Exhibition rejects 245 conventional architectural proposals. Then Joseph Paxton sketches a massive modular glass structure on pink blotting paper during a railway board meeting. By July, it's approved. By May 1st, 1851, the Crystal Palace opens. Pink, blotting, paper. The largest glass building on Earth was designed on office supplies. During a meeting, about trains, not even a meeting about the building. Official construction timeline, 39 weeks. You're telling me it's equally plausible to gestate a baby, or to design, approve, manufacture, transport, and assemble 293,000 custom glass panes into the largest enclosed space on Earth? Not because I've seen people struggle to assemble IKEA furniture with instructions, an Allen wrench, and YouTube tutorials. But sure, 250,000 glass panes in 9 months, with horses, seems legit. The average American home renovation takes 16 weeks and requires 11 permits, 4 inspectors, and at least one screaming match with the contractor. But assembling the largest glass building in human history in half that time with Victorian-era horse carts? The horses must have been really motivated. Maybe they got overtime. Right up until you examine Chicago 40 years later, because the White City makes the Crystal Palace look like a birdhouse. Chicago wins the World's Columbian Exposition. Between 1891 and 1893, under 24 months, 200 massive neoclassical structures are erected using horse-drawn logistics. Buildings that looked like the Parthenon, of the kind of statuary that takes master sculptors years to carve. But sure, they probably whipped those out on lunch breaks. The official explanation is staff, a temporary mixture of plaster, cement, and jute fiber, making the best show for the least money. Here's the problem. The Manufacturers and Liberal Arts building alone contained an electrical grid supplied by 12 1,000 horsepower alternating current generators. An electrical system sophisticated enough to power a small city, Ox in 1893, when most American homes didn't have electricity, so they had the budget for 12 industrial generators but not for actual building materials. That's not frugality. That's someone forgetting which century they're in. You don't install 12 industrial generators into theatrical scenery unless the plaster story is covering for something else. Decades after the fair, researchers examining the foundations found heavy masonry. Brick, stone, whoops. It looks like someone forgot to remove the actual building before installing the fake building on top of it. The World's Fair was one of the most photographed events of the era, yet construction photos are mysteriously scarce. It's like a time lapse where all the lapse is missing, and we just skip from empty swamp to fully operational Rome. Which is odd, because if I just built the Parthenon in 18 months using horses and plaster, I'd be taking selfies in front of it daily. I don't need a LinkedIn. Just look at this photo material. In 50 years, using only horses and allegedly cheap plaster, humanity spontaneously developed the ability to erect dozens of continent-spanning classical megastructures faster than we can build a Walmart today, filed under lost arts right next to Damascus steel and Roman concrete. Yeah, we used to be able to build the Parthenon in 18 months, but now a strip mall takes 3 years. Some progress. It's not possible with the technology they claim, which means either they had technology we don't know about, or they didn't build these structures at all. And if they didn't build them, what were they really doing at these World's Fairs? Because the answer might explain why they spent the next 50 years systematically burning all the evidence. July 10th, 1893. The cold storage building at the Chicago World's Fair catches fire. Direct quote from the acting chief. I stated before the fire, that building is a miserable fire trap and will go up in smoke before long. He's not saying, this building has code violations. He's saying, this building will burn. Not might. Will. If you know a building is a death trap, why not condemn it? Unless the fire was the point. The fire resulted in 17 people losing their lives. The building burned exactly as predicted, almost like it was scheduled. Fire department, please hold. Your conflagration is important to us, and will begin shortly. But that was just the opening act. January 8th, 1894. Massive fire. February 14th. Another massive fire. July 5th. 7 more buildings burn. By the end of 1894, the White City had been almost entirely erased. At what point does accident become a pattern? If this was a crime scene, any detective would call this arson. But it's history, so we call it unfortunate. Bad luck, really? Statistically improbable? Sure. Suspicious? Perhaps. Arson? Let's not get carried away with evidence. At this point, the fire insurance adjuster probably just started pre-filling the forms. White City structure? Yeah, check the arson box. We'll call it lightning. These structures were supposedly built from staff, temporary plaster cement jute mixture, highly flammable. So if they were as flimsy as claimed, why did it take multiple catastrophic fires over 18 months to destroy them? And why did one building survive? The Palace of Fine Arts, built using the exact same materials. Except it operated as a museum until 1933, 40 years after the fair. So the staff material is apparently Schrodinger's construction material, simultaneously highly flammable and fireproof for 40 years. Very accommodating, this plaster. Very situationally aware. But Chicago wasn't the only site of mysterious destruction. November 30th, 1936. A red glow is reported inside the relocated Crystal Palace in London. By 8, the fire is out of control. 89 fire engines, over 400 firefighters, flames shooting 90 meters into the air. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty. From a cloakroom. The official explanation? An electrical fault in a women's cloakroom. The fire that required 89 fire engines, that shot flames 90 meters high, that melted 4,000 tons of iron, allegedly started from faulty wiring in a cloakroom. But sure, let's blame the cloakroom. Ma'am, where should I hang my jacket? Third hook from the left, just past the industrial-grade incendiary devices. Iron melts at around 1,500 degrees Celsius. Wood fires typically max out around 800 to 900 degrees, so either Victorian plaster had the thermal properties of thermite, or someone's lying. And here's where it gets darker. The fire specifically obliterated the South Tower laboratories of John Logie Baird, the television pioneer. Baird was conducting research into electromagnetic wave propagation, the exact kind of research you'd be doing if you were trying to reverse engineer an atmospheric energy grid. Whoops, then it caught fire, from a cloakroom. What are the odds, statistically, that the fire starts in the cloakroom? How it travels directly to the one laboratory doing research that might expose the building's actual function and completely obliterates it? Vegas wouldn't take that bet. Drop your theory in the comments. Or does it sound like someone panicked and said, cloakroom fire, because that was the first thing that came to mind? 1941. The remaining Crystal Palace North Tower is demolished with explosives. Official rationale? To prevent its use as a landmark for German Luftwaffe bombers. Right. Because German bomber pilots were definitely going to spot one specific tower. Never mind that St. Paul's Cathedral, significantly taller, remained standing throughout the war. Quick, black out the Crystal Palace Tower so the Germans don't see it. The glowing river and massive cathedral are fine. Chicago. Systematically destroyed by fire over 18 months. Crystal Palace. Catastrophic fire in 1936. Final demolition in 1941. This pattern repeats across global exhibition sites. If these were just decorative plaster buildings, why the urgency to erase them? You don't systematically erase decorative architecture. You put up a plaque and charge admission. Maybe the answer is in what we're building right now. Because while we were destroying 19th century atmospheric collection architecture, scientists were discovering principles that the architecture had been demonstrating for decades. August 25th, 2010. American Chemical Society scientist Fernando Gallambek announces a breakthrough. This was clear evidence that water in the atmosphere can accumulate electrical charges. We are calling this hygroelectricity. A 200-year-old riddle. That's what he called it. Except apparently 19th century architects did know because they built continent-spanning networks of conductive atmospheric collectors optimized for exactly this phenomenon. Then burned the evidence. Then demolished the leftovers. Then called it a discovery in 2010. That's not discovery, that's rediscovery, or a really convenient memory lapse that lasted 160 years. Ion Power Group and other companies are actively patenting systems to harvest high-voltage atmospheric electricity. Modern devices have detected electrical potentials of 41,200 volts at merely 130 feet of altitude. That's measured, right now. Using technology functionally identical to what was on top of every government building in 1890. But sure, it's cutting edge. So, if we can harvest 41,200 volts at 130 feet today, What could a global network of 200-foot conductive spires have harvested in 1890? And who turned it off? Pull up Google Patents right now. See, search atmospheric energy harvesting. You'll find dozens of active patents filed in the last 20 years. If this technology is cutting edge in 2025, why do the schematics look identical to buildings we tore down in 1894? Here's the thing about evidence. The blueprints exist. The photos exist. But so do the impossible timelines. Both sets of evidence are real. They just contradict each other. And when evidence contradicts, someone's lying. Odd, maybe the mainstream historians are lying by omission, acknowledging the construction records while ignoring the timeline impossibilities. Maybe the alternative researchers are lying by exaggeration. Or maybe the truth is so weird that both explanations sound insane. Maybe the demolitions weren't hiding who built it, they were hiding what it did. Aha, because if you inherited a global network of functional atmospheric energy collection infrastructure and you didn't want people to know that free energy had been available and then deliberately dismantled, you'd do exactly what was done. Recategorize the buildings as decorative, claim they were newly built, and systematically destroy the evidence. You'd make it sound boring. You'd make it sound temporary. And then you'd burn it before anyone asked questions. Well, that would explain why buildings that supposedly took 9 months to build required sustained industrial demolition efforts to destroy. Because it's easy to demolish plaster. It's hard to demolish functional infrastructure that someone might want to turn back on. If this investigation disturbed your reality, share it. Because comfort is how you get people to accept that we can't build the Parthenon in 2 years anymore, but somehow did it in 1893 with horses. So comfort is the enemy of questions. Here's what we know for certain. Modern technology companies are actively patenting systems to harvest atmospheric energy using technology functionally identical to the architectural features found in globally dismantled 19th century architecture. Technology we destroyed, then I forgot, then invented again, then patented, then charged you for. So either we're reinventing something we already built and then forgot, or someone remembered. And they've been sitting on it for 130 years. The buildings are gone. The patents are active. Nobody's asking why free unlimited energy was available, then dismantled, then suppressed, then rediscovered, then patented. Maybe you should start. Because right now, someone's filing patents for technology that used to crown every government building on Earth. And they're calling it innovation. That's not innovation. That's archaeology with better marketing. That's grave robbing with a patent attorney. And the grave they're robbing? It's ours. The energy they're charging us for? It was free. It's still free. It's in the air right now. And they're selling it back to us.